Welcome to Hey Soul Sista, the podcast for women ready to embrace greater joy, freedom, and a soulful life. And if you enjoyed this episode, please remember to subscribe, follow, like, and share. Hey, Charlotte, welcome back to Hey Soul Sista.
Hi, darling.
It's so wonderful to have you back again.
Yes. It's so nice to be back.
And we've done lots of wonderful episodes together and all about how do we live our best lives? How do we live more soulfully? How can we share that with the world?
Yeah. How do we get out of our own way to be freer and to be kinder to ourselves and others, right?
And you do a lot of work around that with your mindfulness practice. Yes. And of course, what I love about you is that even though you're an international speaker, and you do mindfulness training and practice with organizations around the world and really big organizations, that you still do one-on-ones with people like me.
Of course. Well, I think you need both, don't you?
Yeah.
I think so.
Well, and I remember you saying that once it's like, well, it's how you hone your craft. Is doing one-on-ones with people.
Absolutely. Yeah. And one feeds the other.
Yeah.
Right?
And for those of you who are listening, and I think nearly every episode of Hey Soul Sista, I make reference to my mindfulness guru, Charlotte. Oh, this is her.
You're very sweet. But it's dangerous calling anyone a guru.
I know. But I don't know what to say. But you're my mindfulness go-to person.
Yeah, that's a bit more supermarket level. That's a bit more me, I think.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's a bit dangerous, isn't it?
It inflames the ego easily, right?
Yeah.
And really all it means is I've spent a long time on this.
Yeah.
And it's my passion. So yeah.
How long have you spent on it?
20 years. And before that, it was adult education. So I suppose it really has fed it as well, right? So it's 35 years of working with people about life, in effect.
You introduced me to mindfulness practice, and it would have been 14 years ago.
Yep.
Post breast cancer. And it really has changed my life.
Yeah.
For the better.
Yes. Isn't it wonderful?
Yes.
That there is something, so often, people come and they really, feeling unwell, confused, overwhelmed, whatever it might be. And then just a week of 10 minutes a day, and people feel different. I mean, that's just so remarkable, isn't it? And that of the studies that if you compare mindfulness training to some of the antidepressants, after 10 weeks, mindfulness wins, which is the same as exercise. So imagine you do that combination of exercise and mindfulness practice. I mean, that's just amazing. So I always think, unless it's an acute situation, then try mindfulness and exercise first. Right? That makes sense.
Because we want to feel good.
Yeah, we want to not get lost in suffering, right? Which is kind of what, the Buddhist psychology is all about. How do we not do that? So we're free to see life as it is. Amazing. A miracle. I mean, particularly during spring, with the beautiful, all the life that comes forth. It's just amazing, right?
Absolutely. And it's so beautiful right now because we're in spring. And sometimes I forget about it. I'm going to be honest. I forget about it sometimes.
We do. That's normal.
And then something happens, you get the universal got the butt. Something happens and it's like the depths of despair again. It's all the suffering, as you say.
Yes.
And it's like, oh, hang on, that's right. I haven't been doing mindfulness practice.
That's right. There's a way to reduce it.
Yes. So today we're talking about the topic of toxic femininity.
Yes.
Which you introduced me to this topic because I had never really heard of that or I mean I might have heard of it but I had never really stopped to think about it.
No.
But it's obviously something that's been on your radar.
Yes, for many reasons. And some of the first was that I thought that women too easily are let off the hook for accountability and self-responsibility because we can just put the victim hat on and then no one will touch us. No one will dare to challenge us. And I just don't think it's a mature way of being a good feminist. I think there's room for us to stand in our big gumboots and be more real with ourselves and go, hey, really? Let me not score points on the victim front right now when I'm standing here in my expensive clothes, and having been privileged all my life, apart from perhaps the gender card, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it's time to grow up. So that was the first kind of impetus. I also saw some younger women from what I would interpret as kind of having both the tools of the manipulation of their mothers and grandmothers and the very direct, confrontational, modern way of confronting. So they had kind of both the masculine way, if you like, and the feminine. And the men were sort of sitting there completely lost in, feeling it doesn't matter what I do. I can't get out of the web of manipulation, but I can't also just argue my way out of it in a forceful way.
So when you just said that, the manipulation of their mothers and grandmothers. So I guess what you're saying is once upon a time, and probably in previous generations when women weren't so empowered like they are now, that was a tool that they used potentially.
Absolutely. I think it's, and it's very understandable. I'm very interested to reflect on whether it is kind of the way of any subgroup. Right? When you're not empowered, when you don't have the agency, is that what you then go to find your power, your point of influence in a different way, which then could be you put others down, which means that you try to charm, and you're also much more tuned into the person of power around, is this the right time? If I make him a nice meal and I, accommodate for really good sex, then I'm going to ask him about X, right? Which was kind of the, old films, they function like that. They reveal that way of operating. I think it was the way of
previous generations.
I think so. And I think that we now actually have both. And it's time to be accountable around that.
Interesting. When you were just talking about that, about the manipulation, it reminded me of a child. That's what little kids do.
Yes.
To get their way. They totally do.
Yes.
They work mummy off against daddy. Yes. They try and use charm to get an icy pole.
Yes.
They try and use bribery.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's the one with less power, right? So the child accommodates around the parent to try to get its way without direct confrontation, but hopefully that, I suppose with a strategy that the parent doesn't realize that they're being tricked.
Yes.
And I suppose that was kind of the way of females because they had less power. But I think it's important, though, in all of this to kind of start really big and to separate masculinity from femininity. And also masculinity from men and femininity from females, right? So we have these constructs, if you like, energies or definitions. I don't know what to call it because they're kind of abstract definitions. But I think the best way to understand them is through the sexual act, right? So you think, okay, there is a penis and there's a vagina. And in effect, there's a kind of a force and there's a receiver, right? Yeah. And we can see then, if we then kind of extrapolate and go, well, what are some of the other dimensions that are then taken from that? Well, the masculine, it's lots of agency, it's powerful, it's headstrong, it's about, in our culture, success and being focused, whereas the female is then about the receiving, the love, the tenderness, the cyclical understanding of things, the relational. So if we see we have these two dimensions, and of course, ideally both men and women have both, right, and integrate both. The problem is when our culture tries to sort of fix masculinity to men and femininity to women. And from a feminist perspective, what is needed is the equal valuing of both. So valuing caring just as much as engineering or banking, because that's when we have full equality, so that both genders are free to do whatever at the same pay, if you like.
Yeah.
Right? And so the problem comes when men or women internalize one of these, either masculinity or femininity, to the detriment. So with a masculine, it becomes toxic masculinity when it's power over. And the toxic femininity is then when it's a internalized of I must be nice and kind and accommodating And the interesting thing with both of them, when we sit in these identifications, then there's part of us that we don't allow, right? So if I am perhaps a man who's been told, well, I must be successful, I must have a fancy car, I must be do this and this and this, and I must not cry, and I must be the rock of the family, yada, yada, yada. Then I'm feeling vulnerable. I'm feeling lost in perhaps I work so much because I feel I have to, be a good provider. And I've got all these feelings that I don't know what to do with. That's a problem. That's when, in effect, the toxic masculinity becomes detrimental to the man himself.
It's interesting. Two things. First of all, when you were talking just then, I was thinking about, self-reflecting, thinking about my hubby. And he really prides himself on being a provider for our family. That makes him feel really good about himself.
Yes.
That he says to me all the time, law of the jungle, this is my job is to look after you and look after our family. And he takes really great pride in that.
Mm-hmm.
In saying that, he's a very lovely, gentle person.
Yeah.
He's a very kind, lovely person, but that makes him feel really good about himself that he is providing for our family. And our children are grown up.
Yeah.
We have grandchildren.
Yes.
But yeah, that makes him feel empowered and important.
Yes. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's not toxic when it isn't unhealthy.
Yeah.
Right? When it just is that generous heart that is grateful for being in a position where you can do that, there's nothing unhealthy about it. The unhealthy would be, I have worked bloody hard and now you do not go and spend my money and waste my money on this and this and this, or that you have to feel guilty every time you spend, or grateful to him and therefore do things for him because he's done that. That's when it becomes messy, right?
Or you will cook dinner because I've been out earning the money.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
So it's when it becomes more about the power.
Yes.
Power and control.
Yes. And that I am more than, right? Because after all, I provided. So therefore you should submit.
Well, and interesting because I come from the domestic violence world with Got You Back Sister.
Yes.
We talk about toxic relationships and next level's abusive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. Exactly.
So we do a lot of education with women around that.
Yep.
The healthy versus unhealthy relationships.
Yes. And there's always power in that, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we can have all of the beautiful feminine and all the beautiful masculine that isn't toxic in any way. It's healthy. It's wonderful, right? It's just when it becomes about suppression, a power over in any form, be that towards the self or in relationship, that it becomes, well, I'd probably rather call it unhealthy, but it's not as sexy, so let's call it toxic.
Okay, so in terms of women, I feel like this is a little bit of a minefield for people who maybe have never really heard of this or thought about it before.
Yes.
And I haven't given it a lot of great thought. But I was thinking when you were talking about the messages that we give our little grandbabies. So we have 7 grandbabies, as I've talked about before, between like baby and 3 years old. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that as girls, and I was told this, you were probably told this, many girls are told, you be nice, you be a good girl.
Exactly.
You do what you're told.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. Don't speak up. Don't be too demanding, right?
Interestingly, go and kiss.
Mm-hmm.
Poppy, go kiss Granny. And I would have been guilty of that when our kids were young. Mm-hmm. I'm much more conscious of that now, interestingly, because it's like, well, you shouldn't force anybody to do that. But it's like the nice thing. It's the nice thing to do is to go and kiss, hug, greet people a certain way. Mm-hmm. But also be the good girl, be the nice girl. Yeah. Well, it's like the old nursery rhymes. What is it? Sugar and spice and all things nice. Yes. That's what little girls are made of.
Yes, exactly.
And what was the one for boys? Sticks and stones? No, that was sticks and stones will break my bones.
Yes.
But there was something about boys.
Yes.
But the girls was sugar and spice and all things nice.
Yes. So about the messages we send to young children, research is very clear that already a 2-year-old is very clear on all the kind of the loading upon the word woman and man. So they absorb it. So I think in order to raise children who are freer to be who they are, but to check in with what's happening in me and be free to express that, we need to hold back on those gender stereotypes, right? Ideally. The more that we hold off, the better, I think.
Which is hard because we're all programmed that way.
Indeed.
Yeah.
That's right.
And I look, I'm going to be honest, I think it's a bit confusing as well, because you're like, at what point does having those feminine traits, which we've learned, we've been taught, and it's been encouraged,
yes,
when does that actually become toxic?
Well, I think it does when a woman, for instance, feels angry and she still pretends to be nice, right? Because she's so scared of being rejected, and she knows that if she's not nice, she risks rejection. That's kind of the program that we have, right? So what ideally we want to do with boys and girls, encourage them to be kind, encourage them to be clear, encourage them to be polite. Whether they're a boy or girl, it doesn't matter, right? So that they're freer to not, because of their gender, comply or suppress.
It's interesting you were saying that. And a memory popped in my head where years ago, it would have been, I don't know, probably about 9, 10 years ago, a girl that I know came and confronted me about something. And I was very probably steadfast in my view,
right,
and disagreed with her. And she melted into tears. And I remember her sitting there crying and sobbing. And I remember going, I don't understand why you're crying.
Did you feel it was manipulation?
Yes, absolutely,
Yeah,
I did. Absolutely, I did. Because it's funny, once somebody cries, what happens? Everybody feels sorry for them.
Yes.
People in the room, and then all of a sudden you're the bad guy.
Yes, you're the abuser.
You're the abuser.
Yeah.
And I remember just being really surprised and confused. I'm like, I don't understand why you're crying about this. Well, you came to me because you wanted to have this discussion. We've had the discussion. It wasn't aggressive. I didn't think it was aggressive at all. But I think she didn't get what she wanted to hear.
Right.
Yeah.
And it might have been that classic example of actually toxic femininity, right? Where you're using the I'm weak, the victim card, the I'm so nice card to not have a consequence, not be responsible, to not stand up and go, I think you have a point, Mel, for instance, right? Yeah. I mean, another classic, I was at a function and a woman came up to me and she was wanting to badmouth somebody, right? So she said, do you know that he's actually a misogynist? And I said, no, I don't. I've known him for a while. I haven't seen anything like that in him. But she was very keen to keep kind of bad-mouthing this guy, which is a classic toxic feminine tactic, isn't it? So we use, because the key thing for the relation or the feminine is being connected. So the biggest risk is disconnection, being excluded, right? White girls, exactly. The school ground and, grown-up girls. This person is not invited, who's not. And it's a way of exercise power.
Well, I was actually about to say that. The school ground, girls, that's what they do. Rather than having a conversation, they go into this whole, let's just be covertly nasty.
Exactly.
I can't actually come out and say what I want to say because I don't want people to think I'm anything but nice or sweet. I can't speak up about my truth or what's going on for me or what I'm feeling because I've been programmed to be sweet and nice, but I'm going to do it covertly.
Exactly.
Which, you hear all the time.
Yep.
Mums talk all the time about my daughter was left out.
Yes.
Kids didn't come to her party. The pain of that.
Yeah. Somebody said, which I thought was quite interesting, that the TV programs where there's one person who has to find or be married off or something like that, and that the shows where there's one man and more women versus the one where there's one woman and many men is much, much more popular. Because with the men, where there's many men, they're direct. There's no gossip behind the scenes. It's not that interesting.
Yeah.
But with the females, they say one thing when they're with the guy, but there's a whole other story behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And that's classic toxic femininity, right? That we're not direct, we're not honest. We say what we think is the best thing in the moment to say, to be liked, to be approved of, to be sexy, to be whatever. And then we have to kind of talk to our friends or deal with the fallout for that, because what have we suppressed in that?
Okay, I'm going to ask you something. My mind is going. Okay. I'm a pretty direct person.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that?
Yes.
I'm pretty direct.
Yes.
I don't think I'm mean or nasty.
No, certainly not.
But I'm pretty direct. But isn't it funny? Because I just said it then. I'm direct, but I'm not mean and nasty. But there's something around, a lot of people don't like directness. It's confronting for them. And I've always said I would rather sit down and have a conversation and talk something out and be open about that than to whisper behind closed doors, go and offload to other people, do the schoolyard thing. I'm like, let's just have a conversation about this and sort it out.
Yeah.
And it can be hard because especially if people have an avoidant attachment style.
I would be curious about whether at times part of your worry is whether you are nice enough. Has that been the case at times?
At times, because a lot of women are not direct.
Yes, that's right. And we're
They're
told
not
to be
direct.
nice, so we're scared of directness.
Yeah.
Because I know what have seen in myself, but also in other women, that in that field between clear and kind, and we're always worried if we're too clear, was I kind enough? Did I hurt somebody? And which is potentially a good question, but it might also be, am I at the risk of rejection and not being perceived as nice enough? Right? So we're not free in that way. I mean, there's an element where you think it's a healthy human reflection to go, was I kind? Right? But to query it deeper around gender is another dimension. And, we're never done, right? They're ongoing reflections.
Yeah. Because if men are direct, is that different? Is that more acceptable?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't walk around, when I say direct, I don't walk around creating conflict.
No.
But and you said this to me years ago, clear is kind. That's in my head all the time.
Yeah.
Be clear and kind.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Clear is kind.
Yes, that's right.
Because, and it's something that I now really value.
Yeah.
Because if there's an issue, I would rather us sit down and talk about it.
I think that leads to a really, really important point, and that is that women can display toxic masculinity and men, of course, can display toxic femininity. So I was talking to my son. I said, I'm doing this podcast about toxic femininity. And I said, do you have examples? And he said, on TikTok all the time. He said, somebody says something and then, let's say it's a guy who says something, and then he's labeled as a misogynistic, blah, 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 whatever it is. And then the girls' posts are about kill all men. May they just disappear. Let's slay them. Which you could say, well, that's toxic femininity, but it's actually not. It's toxic masculinity because it's power over. And I mean, I heard somebody close to me said, why do we actually need them? Let's just get rid of men. I mean, really, we just need 1 in 100 or 1 in 1,000. And you go, that's a shocking, appalling thing to say, right? Of a mature feminist. And you go, that is so inappropriate. And now you're completely doing the toxic masculinity, which is power over.
Yeah, I see a bit of that on social media. Recently there were protests in town. A couple of weeks ago, they had the March for Australia rally, and then there was an opposing group.
All right.
And they said, we're going to come and do a peaceful counter-protest.
Right.
But what I saw on social media was not peaceful. And they were all, revving each other up on social media. I'm like, that's not peaceful at all. That's actually just as bad as the other guys.
Yeah.
And look, my humble opinion, that doesn't really solve anything.
No.
On either side.
No.
It's actually coming back to peaceful, loving thought, actions, words. Just yelling at each other and then getting abusive.
And not listening.
Yeah.
So even the thing of just, technically speaking, if we're just speaking at, that's the masculine.
Yeah.
Right? Which is interesting. Whereas the good listening is the feminine. Now, you don't want too much of either. You want ideally integration of both. And I think we have to remember that, if I have given birth to 2 sons and they're born just these little innocent babies as a little girls, right? And then we download programs into them around how they should be. And that's the problem at times, right? because then they have that, they're always comparing their inner experience with this program. So ideally, the more we can leave that flexible for them and just encouraging the healthy, be that kindness, compassion, clarity, helpfulness, whatever it is, in both, the freer they are to kind of be themselves and not be at odds with the societal expectations of who they should be according to their gender.
Mm. When does toxic femininity and toxic masculinity become disorder?
I'm not the specialist in this field. I think you need to be a psychiatrist to look at that. I think in some ways it's also perhaps more interesting to look at when does it in ourselves go from healthy to unhealthy.
Okay.
Right?
We're pulling that back.
Yeah,
from disorder.
let's pull it back to that because but I also think it's very clear that particularly personality disorders, of course, will display both, right? The power over and the manipulation. Both the narcissist will do that and the borderline will do that. But in ourselves, I think it's really when we know that in the body it's contracting. When we know this doesn't feel right, then we know that this is unhealthy. Or when we are shouting, when we are dominating, when we're not listening, when we're assuming the other one is stupid or irritating, then it is a subtle way or behavior that leads towards a unhealthy masculinity.
Yeah, I've got a thought.
Okay. Love it.
What happens when you get someone who displays toxic masculinity and they're in a relationship with the toxic femininity?
Oh, juicy. Let them enjoy it. Fight on, which is not uncommon.
Really?
Well, I don't think so.
I guess if you've got the dominant toxic masculine and then you've got the submissive, manipulative feminine, that's...
It swings.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And I would say that there would be not many people, myself included, who if you've been in a relationship where there's elements of toxic masculinity, you have resorted to toxic femininity in order to survive.
Yeah.
And that's not a justification, but it's a realization, I think, that they go together easily, right? And of course, the development for both is to become the adult, right? Is to let go of these and have shared power versus power over or manipulative power.
So, big question. Why does all this matter?
It matters for healthy relationships and for healthy humans. And coming back to the initial point around suffering, I think that I see so many women in leadership positions who over-nurture to the extreme, who are then, as a consequence, they don't delegate enough, they do it themselves, and they feel they have to be perfect mothers, perfect partners, and always be kind and together, looking good. The house has to be wonderful. All of that internalized standard for what a good woman is becomes a torment for them. Right? Because, and they disappear themselves. They don't even know who they are. They're just trying to live up to this internalized standard. And then at 45 or 50, they kind of go, oh my God, I'm so exhausted. And who am I? Who am I? And what do I want to be? And that's when we then shed a little bit of that cloak, if you like.
That's interesting because through Hey Soul Sista episodes, we've been exploring midlife,
yes,
getting to 45, 50,
yes,
55, and actually going, how do I want my life to be?
Exactly.
How do I shift anything that I need to shift or transition or change? What is it that I want? And then how do I live the rest of my life on my terms?
Yes. And imagine if we hadn't had the download as powerfully around how we should be. So we had actually lived most of our lives in alignment with what felt right.
Well, Carl Jung, and I've mentioned this before, and he was talking about spiritual awakening in the shadow. But what really struck me, and he talked about the first half of our life, we live our life based on what the world expects us to be.
Yes, yes.
And then there's the shift when you get, midlife. Then all of a sudden, maybe not all of a sudden, might have been stewing for a while, but you get to a point where you're like, no, what does my soul call for me to do? Or what does my soul call for me to be? And I want to live my life from that way, from that calling, rather than what the world and everybody expects from me.
Yeah, which is always run out of fear, right? Because it's fear of not being good enough, it's fear of rejection, etc. Yeah, so it's coming into a surplus way, a heart-opening way that we are yearning to live. Absolutely.
And living from soul is living from love.
It is fascinating because in alignment with the same rhythm, the same hum as nature itself, not at odds with.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's quite beautiful. So when we come into being connected to our senses and being present and not being limited by our ideas of who we should be, then the brain frequency, if you like, changes, and it changes to the same combination as nature itself. And this is work by Lisa Miller. It's absolutely fascinating. And when we are living in that way, what happens is that we are much more likely to experience synchronicity, amazing synchronicity.
So if a soul sister's listening to this and she's recognizing, okay, I may be playing some of that toxic femininity, they may be, and doing that unconsciously, how can they make a shift? What do you do?
Yeah, so the first thing is really just being aware. For instance, cutting out triangulation, where I position myself as the victim and I go to you to collude, and I'm talking about somebody who's abusing me, right? Hopping off that one. And if somebody comes to you and wants to collude around somebody else being awful, you don't catch the ball. So you simply ask, so what do you want to do about that? How do you want to be in position with that? How do you want me to help you have a conversation with that person, right? You solicit forth the adult, if you like. So that's the first thing to sort of, and I think it's a good idea to just hone in on one area. Like, I don't think there are many people who hands on heart can say they never collude. They never, go on triangulation. So that's a good place to start. Be curious around how you might pussyfoot around some people to want their approval, to want them to like you, or as a woman, how at times it can be very hard to actually ask for what you'd like. That's another thing that is a really big challenge for many women. Just being clear around what you'd really like versus just going, oh, it'll be all right. Don't worry about it. No, I'm fine. What would you really like? And sometimes people say, I don't even know what I'd like because I'm so used to dimming that. But how do you then start to connect with what would you really like? So there's a few things that I'd be curious about.
When you have people come and see you and have one-on-one sessions with you, how often is this an issue?
Oh, all the time. All the time. It is also for men, right? There's men who are very avoidant, of course, and very pleasing, where you actually have almost the opposite dynamic, where he's the toxic feminine and she's the toxic masculine. But definitely the issue for women, particularly around 45 to 50, it's one of the really big issues. And where it's actually a rebirthing of the self almost.
I see it as such an exciting time.
Yes, it is. It is very exciting.
It really is to get to this point. And that's, I got to that point actually pretty much when I was 49 turning 50. It was almost like a little bit of a line in the sand.
Yes.
And also learning more around Carl Jung, and I went out to a retreat up in the Byron hinterland. All of those little things added up to going, hey, this is an opportunity.
Yes, it is absolutely.
To live life how I want to live it.
Yeah. And you probably have noticed how little drama you have when you're living like that, right? Because the manipulation, the toxic femininity and masculinity elements just generate endless drama. So that's the suffering piece, right? And so we need to sort of just place it down and walk away.
Yeah. And I would like to apologize to my boss from 20 years ago. He was a really, he's such a lovely man.
Mm-hmm.
He had a team of all women. He was, our manager, and he was a really, really lovely, fair man.
Wonderful.
Great boss.
Yeah.
I totally look back at how I used to try and whittle my way to get my own way on things. Work-wise.
Yes.
In a work situation, I'm
Yes.
like, I was probably totally wielding that toxic femininity then.
And I think when this is a good example of, it's very important to just give self-compassion to that little Mel.
Yeah.
Right? Because you didn't know any better.
Mm.
Right? To just go, oh, that was the way I had sort of been taught to function, to get my way.
Yeah.
Right?
And I reckon there'd be other women who might have done that sort of thing as well.
Just think a few facts.
Trying to get her own way on something.
So I know my mother at times has said, just find the right time to bring this topic up. When he's in a good mood, then that's what you can have this discussion about this. And there's an element where you think, well, that's just being pragmatic, right? And then there's an element where it shifts over to actually being manipulative. Right. And I suppose we should think about that ourselves, what it is for us in the moment.
So if anybody would like to learn more about toxic femininity or come and have a session with you, if maybe they're feeling a little bit stuck around that or identifying with anything that we've talked about, how could they reach out to you?
Oh, you can always email me. It's charlotte@themindfulnessclinic.com.au, or you can check my website. There's lots and lots of free resources also there. And Spotify, the channel is mindfulness_alive. Lots of free articles. All my newsletters are there in audio form. And of course, all the meditations.
Well, thank you so much, my friend. Thank you for coming.
Pleasure.
This has been really interesting.
It is very interesting. It's an interesting topic, isn't it?
It is. I
And
feel
there's
like
a lot to learn.
I feel like I've shared way too much.
Oh, I love when you do that. That's so good. But the other thing that is very interesting is that the interpretation of toxic femininity varies very much from who the viewpoint of the person. Like I was listening to somebody who's a fundamental Christian, and she said that pro-abortion is a toxic femininity, which I thought, no, it's actually, technically speaking, I would think it's toxic masculinity. It's power over, if you want to frame it like that, right?
Yeah.
But it just means it depends on where you stand, how you see it.
Yeah. So, I've loved this. Thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you.